All right, so hello everybody, welcome. I'm Darcy Ladwig. I am a housing coordinator with Peace Northwest. Welcome to our monthly information night. Today we have a panel of people that are going to share with you about companion homes. And I know that we're waiting on somebody from DDA. So I was wondering, I attended another meeting where families were sharing like interesting things that they've learned in their housing journey. And so do we want to take a few minutes? Has anybody learned anything about housing or want to know anything about housing that they just maybe heard a term about, or while we wait for a few more people to join us, hopefully?
There's Monica.
Well, I know after you presented in the Building Independence group, everybody was excited about the possibility of living in some sort of independent or semi-independent arrangement, and just wanted all the knowledge from you. So thank you for sharing that with our group.
Of course, yes.
I learned from that group that only old people live in condos.
Yes.
That's what our Building Independence group notified us of. Only old people live in condos. No, but you're getting old, Jess. You must be. You live in a condo.
Well, and how also soulmate.
Oh, okay. Jesse said soulmates live in condos too.
Oh,
So there you go.
good addition.
Good addition. Yes. I did learn something really interesting about housing, and I can't recall it at the moment. So there you go. That's where my brain is tonight. It will come back to me before the evening's over.
Okay. Should we go ahead and get started then? All right.
Yeah. So go ahead, Darcy. Sorry.
I was just going to say that I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Darla Helt, our companion home expert.
Not a companion home expert in any way, shape, or form, just a mom who's accessing the service. But thank you so much. We actually have quite a few people here today. So, where I am at with companion homes is my dearest and darling friends brought them to Washington State, and I have been watching it since its inception and before. And my family has benefited from it. My son's been in 2 different companion homes. So, anyway, so that's where I'm at. And Monica, I'm going to pass it off to you. Why don't you introduce yourself? And if you're not talking, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be great, everyone. Thank you.
And I just had dinner. So I'm like, I didn't have time to check my teeth. So apologies ahead of time. As Darla said, my name is Monica Meyer. And I am a parent of a now 38-year-old son with autism and an intellectual disability, and a group of families. And I want to say it was between, I think, 93 and 1994, that collectively we had families that were really struggling with the idea of our kids who had more high acuity needs, that their ability to live in the community was just didn't seem like a reality, because just being able to be in a group of people, even more than 2 people, sometimes just 2 people, was difficult for anybody to really kind of wrap their head around. So what we did is, this group of 13 families, we worked in conjunction with the Parent Coalition. At the time, the director was Sandy Silvera, and we just really talked about what would we like it to look like. And so we took time doing some research, traveling across the United States, looking at different options. And what it circled around and came back to was the vision of a companion home. And the companion home, excuse me, was the idea of having our son or daughter live with a companion in the community, that they would take care of their support needs, and more along the lines of an extended family type of scenario where, none of us with our kids growing up even could imagine us not being part of their life. And that was one of the realities that we found out, was especially in supported living, that oftentimes families were kind of pushed out of the picture. And so what we wanted is, how can we make this a collaborative effort? So we went through the process of first deciding on what we wanted. The next step was that we went and lobbied the Washington legislature. That took us more than a couple of attempts to get that, I would say, championed. And it took us, on our last attempt that we made, that although it was, when it was championed, went through and it was on the DDA budget. And although we championed it, we still had to apply for it. And so we applied for what is called an RFP, which is an RFQ, request for qualifications. And so we went through the process of putting in our application. In the meantime, we developed our own 501c3, got all of our bylaws, got everything set up. We had the help of Mary Strelo at the time, who was with Clark County Developmental Disabilities, that we had access. We had some resources that we were able to access, attorneys and CPAs to help us with this process, as well as some collaboration or collaborative consulting supports of our board. So finally, after all that was said and done, we were awarded the RFP, or excuse me, the RFQ, and we were basically on our way. And that's, although I was one of the families that worked on this, I became the executive director. And the first year was a pilot, and it was a pilot project that was being funded by DDA, and it was being studied by the University of Washington. And the idea was that we were going to have people who would be able to live in the community, have the resources such as having a training opportunities for companion home providers to go through. In addition, there would be a specific amount of of respite hours that were provided to the companion home provider at an enhanced rate, meaning it was paid over and above what other respite care providers were paid in the state, because of the acuity needs that our sons and daughters had. That was for companion home. There was another component of our project that also had children that were under the age of 18, that we had families that were just struggling with finding respite care providers at the minimum wage rate. And so with the enhanced rate, we were able to find more respite care providers. They were able to go through training and support kids at home, as well as providing support for the companion home providers. Because the companion home provider, as maybe some of you know or don't know, is that they are contracted through the state to be basically the oversight of all the care and support needs of an individual. That means they have the oversight of the 24/7 care of the individual. That was our son or daughter, that they would arrange and coordinate respite care providing, that they would also do the medical, any medical support care needs, that they would coordinate that along with the family. the first round of folks for Autism Community Services, of what it was called at that point, identified 2 individuals, 2 adults and 2 children. Interestingly enough, the original individuals, the 2 adults and the 2 children, are still with the same companion home provider, and that is now 23 years later. That's the process of finding the companion home providers. Really, families had already done a lot of their homework. We'd already did a lot of scouring the countryside, looking for individuals that would be interested. They also received an enhanced rate to be a companion home provider. And many of the families that started actually moved out of their family home so that their son or daughter could stay in the home that they were raised in. And then they took, families took any equity that they had and then bought themselves another house. And as I said, it has, of the 13 families, I'd have to go back and do data, of which I did not prepare that piece of it, and I should have, because I love data. A large percentage still of those individuals are in companion homes, are living in the community, while others, there are some situations where we have the individual has moved home, while we have 2 others that went to live in an RHC, which is a residential rehabilitation center, which is, for others know it as an institutional setting. And like I said, and while others are in supported living that live in their community. It really, the first year was it was a big push. Actually, the first 2 years, the DDA really wanted us to, obviously to follow what we had originally proposed, to see what the outcomes would be. And the outcomes really was very positive. Matter of fact, I still have the assessment or the evaluation that was done by the University of Washington for this project, and that it was a collaboration between family, the state, and a contracted companion home provider, and that that we were able to, like I said, oftentimes have our son or daughter still in the same community, that families participated in providing respite care, while other times it was, they had respite care providers and family still could stay connected by seeing their son or daughter at least, 3 to 4 times a month. And so that was, and some a whole lot more than that. And that would have been the case for myself when my son was in a companion home provider, is that we worked out that actually his companion home provider was with Michael Monday through Friday, 24 hours, 5 days a week. And that his dad would have him all day, would actually have him, excuse me, one weekend, then I would have him the following weekend. So we traded off weekends. So the companion home provider actually had weekends off. Other people, that wasn't what they wanted. And so the companion home provider decided that they would coordinate the respite. And they had several people that would come, not several, they would have people that would come in. We also had respite care providers that was shared within the group. It was an exciting time, I can tell you, but I can also tell you that we didn't get funded and started until 2000. And so we worked for almost 6 years ahead of time. It was, we were not only that, was preparing ourselves for the potential that we could have the funding, and that were we ready? And that was really what we had to do, is, are you ready for this? And then the second round, we got additional funding for more additional people to get companion home support as well. And that second round was for 4 additional individuals. And again, it was like, are you ready? And it was because we had kind of our feet were to the fire, that the state wanted to see what the outcomes would be. They wanted to measure it. That we wanted people that were ready, that they wanted to be able to do this in a that it was going to take, it wasn't just trying to take now and take that information and get to the point that you had some sort of resolution to the fact. It's like, no, you've got to be there already. And so, like I said, sometimes it took the first two people, when the adults, that they were ready, they already had somebody identified and they were ready to go. The two children, that took a bit longer, and I went through an interview process and we found people that were interested in it, and that took a bit longer. But of that, the children component of it, like I said, there's one individual that she's been with her for 21 years, just in April, 21 years. So, the longevity, the commitment of people, the support that they had originally was very positive. And I could say after the state decided this is going to be a good option that we could share with the rest of the state, they, obviously did some streamlining. They did some cutbacks. So there was some respite that wasn't available. The enhanced rate went away. But even at that, it has been successful in a lot of ways. The other thing that was really good about the process was that I was able to help with, as the executive director of Autism Community Services, is get contracts through the process. And so the contracts were really expedited because they wanted to help make this a reality for folks. And so Sue Buckholz, and then I'll go to Darla. Sue says, how long does it take to get into companion home care when you have a provider that desires to do this? That's a great question, Sue, because if you have somebody who's interested in it, it could take anywhere from like 6 weeks to probably maybe 3 months. And some of that is just the contracting. After that, it comes to where they're going to live. How are we going to, put a contract together? Some of it was, how do we coordinate and collaborate the process of how's this going to manifest so that it could be all successful. And then Darla, do you have a question?
I do. I had forgotten that we had kids under 18 doing this originally. Currently, you have to be over 18. They're no longer doing kids under 18, are they?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I just had totally forgotten that portion. And then the other thing I just wanted to respond. So we did our last companion home in the fall of 2020, and we had a home. It was already set up. So we had the right waiver. We only had to go through contracting. And I would say it took probably 3 to 4 months to get through contracting.
And that really has been really dependent on, through this whole process, there has been, cutbacks, and then we've had more budgets, and we had cutbacks in staff. And so the ebb and flow of the ability to get contracts through is really dependent on where GDA stands in their staffing. And I would say, because of COVID, as nasty as this has been, the thing that's been really good about it is that companion home providers and contracting has been expedited, because there's a lot of things that could be done online, which before it would need to be hand delivered or sent up to central for signing and those types of things. So there's some a little more expediting of processes. Rachel says also, how does the training requirement differ from an IP provider that decides to transition to companion care? I don't know. Darla, can you?
So when she did, I'm trying to think. I don't remember the details, but I think that the training, it is different training because it's like a residential training versus an IP training. So that portion is different. And, honestly, she was really good about just taking care of the training. So I don't know. That might be a question that we hold for Valerie toward the end. So Valerie is here from BDA. And she's going to talk last, and we're going to, let her go last. And then Candace, so Candace is actually a companion home provider that has joined us this evening. So Candace, do you have an answer to that question?
So which question is it now?
It is, what is the training requirements to become a companion home provider?
Basically, the training requirements was a CNA, certified nurse assistant, and then you do 80 hours of training. And there's other training involved that wasn't required for a CNA that we had to go through too. So, and it's always good to know some other companion home providers so you can get more information from them too, and they'll help lead you too.
Wonderful.
Candace, what is the yearly requirement of training?
12 credits.
Okay.
And I have to thank Monica. She's provided the best classes I've ever had and attended. Thank you for teaching me so much.
Well, thank you, Candace. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Carrie, you have your hand up. Carrie
I do.
Harris?
Thank you so much. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
I'm wondering a little bit about what type of person is a good candidate for a companion home. And I know there's no one size fits all, but can you talk a little bit about sort of a good candidate and
Yeah.
and maybe folks that are better served in other settings?
Yes, that's a good question. And it will probably answer Cindy Bailey's question as well, which hers was, can a companion home be a family member, sister, brother, cousin, aunt, uncle? And those answers are yes. And those can be really good identified people to be a companion home provider. Another group of folks would be somebody who already provides respite care or individual personal care. Those are good candidates as well. I know that is one area that we found a lot of people that were they wanted to be able to continue the work as a respite care. And I can tell you again, the other part to this that made companion homes appealing was that there was the individuals received a livable wage. That is non-taxed because it is care. And actually, I would imagine Valerie could talk a bit about what that would look like and what the reimbursement for that contract is on a monthly basis. But that was, like I said, it's something that was very appealing for folks because they could live, they could save, they could buy houses. There were a lot of things that provided opportunity that otherwise had not been available for folks. And I hate to say this too, but one of the other areas that was good to be able to find a companion home provider were current supported living providers. Don't say that I said that, but
she just said that.
It's just something that that's where a couple well, actually, there were two of the individuals that originally started as companion home providers were supported living providers that lived and worked in Portland. And that when we started doing the advertising part of that they came over to came over to Oregon. I mean, came over from Oregon to Washington, and that they were happy to continue because that's their life's mission.
The other thing, just to add on to that, is it really depends on the person who's a good fit, right? So one of the things I think about, like for my son, is a good fit would be somebody that was in college or had other activities that they wanted to do as well. A companion home provider cannot have any paid job outside of the home. The individual is their care 24/7. But my son works and has other things going on. So they could have classes and different stuff like that set up, and it would provide a flexible schedule. And to go back to Cindy's, yes, Cindy, I did have my daughter-in-law was a companion home provider for a while. And my niece currently is, but Jesse doesn't know she is. He thinks they're just housemates. So
That's it. Yeah. And we did have where we had a sister in another situation that she was the companion home provider. So that worked out very well. We've had situations where we've had cousins, aunts, a lot of different folks. Obviously, it can't be a parent or someone who's married, basically to, two parents. That's obviously not allowed. And actually, if those who want to look in there, Valerie put in the chat box, basically the requirements for companion home training. When must a companion home provider complete their training requirements? And it's before a companion home provider may deliver services to a client. They must go through 5 hours of safety orientation, 4 hours of DDA developed residential service curriculum, 6 hours of first aid certification in CPR, 6 hours of DDA companion home orientation, and then no more than 120 days after the effective date.
Oh, sorry, that cut off at the end. I'll try to put the rest of it in there.
All right, thanks, Valerie. And so that, like I said, there's a host of people, I know in other places in the state where people, similar to what Darla was saying, is that they were able to maybe tap into the college, look for people who might be interested in becoming a long-term care provider. And, just to kind of go back to when we originally started the companion homes for the state of Washington, we'd asked that the companion home providers at least commit 3 years. That was just something that we originally identified, just because, the whole process of just trying to get contracted, and, the fact that the majority of people in our group were nonverbal. I'm just trying to go through the whole, all nonverbal. And so there was the relationship development, the process of getting to having the person get to know that individual before they even contracted. That was those were some big, I don't want to say hurdles. They were just things that we wanted to make sure that this was going to be a good fit. And that we, like I said, we wanted folks to be ready. And we also wanted to make sure that we had a relationship that was a positive working relationship, and relationship with the person that they would be supporting, because just having a warm body is not going to work. It's not about staffing. It is about a relationship. It's about creating an opportunity, a living opportunity in the community that, that each would have purpose in their life, that they would provide and have an opportunity to grow and thrive in the community. And that was our whole idea. The whole purpose was not isolation. It's not about staffing. It is about literally creating a bigger, broader network of support that would make a difference for each person.
One thing too, one group I want to mention is when my daughter-in-law was the companion home provider, it worked really well because it allowed her, my grandsons were little, and it allowed her to stay at home with the grandkids while still providing care. And at the time, her and my son were really super close.
They are still super close, just not,
He says they're still super close,
just,
just
it's just working better.
it's working better than it was. As my grandkids got older though, and they started driving and dating and stuff, there started to become more friction there. But I can see where for a lot of people, I know my son loved being the big uncle who was there to help with the grandkids, right?
Please don't talk
That-
about me, because
I'm not talking about you behind your back. I'm talking about you in front of you. That really, was helpful to him. Candace, can you share what brought you into the field?
Well, I was doing respite care for 8 years before we got to this point. Oh, 8 years beforehand, and then I'm into it 9 years now as a companion home provider. And I was just talking to the other companion home provider about her and asking about it because I was curious if I could, how long, if I decide not to want to do this job, how can I get out of it? But he says, our contract only goes for 2 years, so there's always changes you can make if you need to. But we've connected so much. I would never. I mean, we're in it till the end. we do, yeah. I really enjoy doing it.
Great.
John Gaddis had asked, so where do you find specific guidelines for companion homes? And John, if you would wait until Valerie talks, we will answer that question. And then Sue had also said, do you know if NAR works instead of a CNA? Again, that's kind of a question for Valerie, and we will certainly get to that piece as well. Darcy put in the chat box is the fact sheet regarding DDA through Fortress. It gives you kind of a synopsis of a companion home. And then Carrie, another question is, in a companion home, is it a good match for an individual with an intellectual disability who has lots of capacity for independence, but needs skill training? And I think that's going to be also kind of answered by Valerie. But what I can tell you is that you need to qualify for a core waiver. You need that there needs to be really some specific parameters around that. And I can say, like I said, the companion home worked really well for people who really need one-to-one support in services that, like for my son, he needs 24/7 line of sight support. And so that is why he qualified and why it was a really good fit. For a lot of reasons that I won't go into tonight, Michael is not in a companion home, though he was for the first 16 years that he was out of school. And it was very successful. And our hope in a dream would be probably within the next 5 years that Michael again would be in a companion home. That would be my hope, because the beautiful part of it is that Michael thrived. He, for somebody who has incredible social anxiety, he was able to start going into the community, doing things other than just with mom. And that his companion home provider, she had friends and nieces and nephews and people that would come over for dinner, that he had access and exposure to people that he otherwise would have been just with mom, dad, or immediate family. So it really created an opportunity to expand his world in ways there's no way that I could have done that for him. And then Sue had asked, is the amount of compensation commensurate with the level of care required for an individual? And I think, again, if you put that into your hat there, Valerie, and you could speak to that, because I don't want to answer that. And then Carrie, you said, what is the waiver again? And that is a core waiver. And again, the core waiver is there's basic plus, there's at a core waiver. That basic plus is typically what many folks have, and based on the algorithm of their person-centered service plan, they identify the level of care the individual needs. And from that, they can say what level of support that the person needs. And so that's, like I said, the compensation, again, Sue, is going to be something that they will talk about. And I can tell you from a CNA standpoint, from a supported living standpoint, from a respite care standpoint, it is, like I said, it's a very livable wage. And you work, like I said, in conjunction with payees, you work in conjunction with, you're kind of like the chief cook and bottle washer. You do everything, but the thing that's great about it is that you have the family as the standby, that they are helping and mentoring. And that I can tell you for Michael, and even now Michael's in supported living, I do all of his medical care. I am with Michael at least 2 full days a week. That would be also what I would do in a companion home situation. That's something that for as long as I have breath in my body, I'm going to continue to do that. I don't want to relinquish that to anybody because of the complexity of his medical needs. That the idea is that will be handed over to my daughter in the event that, I'm no longer on this earth or capable of taking care of Michael's needs. But that could be, obviously done, which I know one of the companion home providers that that the mom actually has moved out of state. And so she literally does all the care for this individual. And there's, each person is so individual. It's like I said, the lens that I'm looking through right now is folks who had really high acute health, behavioral, communication support needs that would not have otherwise been met in a supported living environment at that time in our community.
So I believe there's now 70 some, and Valerie can correct me, but I think there's it's either 72 or 78 companion homes across the state. And so my son does qualify as high acuity needs. He is on a core waiver for behavioral issues. He is verbal, and when he's not around me, doesn't have nearly as many behaviors.
Right.
Right. But he would not have been successful living with other people with disabilities. And we had already really shown that because he had another brother with a disability, and that did not work well. So we already had a kind of a baseline for that we already had the core waiver. But there are ways to go from a basic plus to a core waiver and to make that request if that's what you're needing. I'd kind of like to hear from Candace on kind of some of the boots on the ground challenges and just kind of whatever you want to share. It doesn't have to be challenges. What works well, what doesn't work well, just whatever you'd like to share with us.
What works well? Well, I find having a family member doing the guardianship has worked the very best way of all. And it's at least for the medical and of course some of the room and board, of course. And so that way we work together and we get along and we work really well together and making sure all of her needs are met. Some of the challenges I think has been the long nights and trying to get some rest. But we find ways to resolve. Problem solving is a big deal in this job, and we work together at it. I'm very grateful for that. Other challenges. God, challenges. You got to really know the person. You get to know them, I think, and you know how they just work, and in that way you can be their best companion and support their daily life the best way possible. There's just, I don't know. I don't find it much of a challenge at all. We go about living our life,
Nice.
and she's part of the family. We do everything together. We share my grandchildren. We have a good time.
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
When, oh, sorry, Monica. I
No,
was just gonna say, when Jesse first went into a companion home, he was 19 or 20. And so he was still kind of growing up and developing, right? And there was a lot of change that
I
happened
don't
in,
know.
how old were you, Jesse?
Now you can help me, but I'm pretty sure I was 18.
18? I think maybe you were
No. Wait, got that wrong. Not 18, 9.
19. Yeah, you were 19. And
Yeah, but oh, let's keep going.
thank you, Jesse.
But please, whatever you do, not
I won't. Okay.
talk
Sorry,
about,
guys.
don't talk about, me and.
I won't. So anyway, sorry, I get corrected all the time. But so he was 19 years old, and so he still had a lot of growth and development, and he changed and grew. And the situation that he was in changed and grew in a different direction, right? And so I think that's one thing to realize, that it's really typical development for our kids to grow and to try different situations. It's not like we find one spot, they're just going to stay there forever. I don't think any of us do that. So anyway.
And the other thing I was going to add to this, that, what you were talking about, Candace and Darla, one issue that has come up more than once is in the event that, say, the companion home provider, first, to start with, is the companion home provider is contracted through the state to provide services as an independent contractor. It's their responsibility to do the work, and that I believe they need to give 30 days notice in the event that they no longer can provide the care. And in some situations, it has been difficult for people to understand that although you might have family that is very much involved with the individual, it doesn't mean that in the circumstances, like I said, in more than one occasion, that all of a sudden we have, their son or daughter, the companion home provider. We had a situation where her mother had a terminal disease, and she said, you just need to take him home because I have to take care of my mother. I was like, yeah, well, no, you need to give me 30 days because I need to look for somebody else. And so there was some pushback and that was one regards. And I know of another situation where the companion home provider's husband has been ill. And again, and it's in another situation, this isn't mine, that she went to the mother and said, who is the guardian? She said, you need to take him home because I have to take care of my husband who's in the hospital. And she said, I am more than happy to help with you do this, but I work full time. You're getting paid. You have to give me 30 days and we will work with this. We can work with this together, but let you know, you've got all the respite. You're getting paid to do this. I'm working full time. If I have to take time off, I am not paid. My life will be completely disrupted. So I think having clear communication lines of communication with the individual upfront to say, this is what the contract states, that you need to give me 30 days notice, that in the meantime, we can work things. And that's the beauty of this, is to be able to work together. And I would say one of the could be a negative is that after 30 days, you don't have a companion home provider, then your son or daughter may be moving home.
And one of the situations that's come up recently, and Valerie put in there, it looks like it's been moved to 60 days written notice now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. One of the things that's come up recently, though, is, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always planning for when I'm not here. And with the companion home, it's like, okay, so if I'm not here and the home provider no longer can do it, then what happens, right? And so that's part of that succession planning that we're working on. And what does that look like? And honestly, without having a plan and without having figured it all out, I would just say a lot of it's going to fall on the shoulders of the backup guardian, similar to how it would fall on the shoulders of the parents if they were here. And I know somebody asked me today about finding respite providers, because we do have several companion home providers who are struggling immensely to find those respite providers. As Monica said, when we first started this program, when they first started this program, I'm writing on their shirt tails, that the respite was enhanced respite, so it was easier to attract respite providers. But you all know how hard it is to find a respite provider regardless of the level of acuity, right? And so for companion home providers to find respite providers, it continues to be a challenge as well. And also, this is another question for Valerie, I do think that companion home providers get more respite than families do. I know historically that's been the case, and it's changed, but they don't get as much as they used to, but I still think they get more than a family. I know when my son blew out of his companion home and he moved back in with me because he was having seizures in a really difficult time and a really hard time, the level of care that he received dropped substantially, both in respite and personal care and everything else, because his needs went up, but because he moved in with me, his level of care his level of services through DDA dropped. So that was hard.
Yeah, that is, like I said, when we had originally started this, the enhanced respite was 50%, an additional 50%. So let's say you had $10 that you received a month, an enhanced rate would be $15. So it was, like Darla said at the time, that was a very, that is more of an appeal, and that draws more people. It also included that there would be training. And as Candace said, I, at that time, and I still do now, is provide community inclusion. Good Lord. Now I provide continuing education credits through DDA so that people can get the credits. But at the time, I also did that for companion home providers as well, so that they would have the training and have access to training that at that point wasn't being offered in the field of autism.
Other questions, guys?
And so John,
I will
you
say
said,
living on my own is better than.
I
living
thought
with-
Washington removed the backup or standby guardian, remove the backup or standby guardian. Is this in regards to a companion home? I'm sorry, I'm not, can you answer that, Darla?
All right,
Yes,
I'm getting schooled here. You're not schooling me. I'm just supposed to tell you that living on his own is way better than living in a companion home. He lives on his own with his cousin, lives as a housemate with him, and she cooks and cleans and buys groceries and pays bills and helps with things. But living on his own with that housemate is a better option, he said. So, and I don't know, John, I'm just checking. I did look the other day and I thought it was still there, but I'm trying to check.
The rules changed as of January 1, 2022. And so I just had my son's guardianship just renewed in December. So I know that there are changes, and I'm sorry, I can't answer that question at that point. I would look
It's-
into the guardianship, legal dark guardianship website through state of Washington.
Yeah, it's RCW 11.88.125. Standby limited guardian or limited guardian effective January 1, 2022. Any individual or professional guardian appointed by the court as either guardian or limited guardian of a person and or an estate of an incapacitated person shall file in writing with the court within 90 days from the date of appointment a notice designating a standby guardian or standby limited guardian to serve as guardian or limited guardian at the death, legal incapacity, or planned absence of the court-appointed guardian or limited guardian. So yeah, it's still required. Do you want me to send this to you, John? Oh,
I don't know if he's.
it
here
did
yet.
change. Yeah, it did. The laws changed January 1st, 2022, but you still have to have the backup guardian. I'll copy and paste this and send this out to you guys.
Thank you, Cindy, too.
Yeah, thanks, Darla.
Welcome. You know, the other thing is, so like my son's here tonight, right? So as a family, we've always used his respite to get him out in the community and to engage with peers and all those kinds of things, right? And then as a family support, he's at my house on Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, and Sunday evening. That's just, and we had to set boundaries. The companion home literally is like 4 doors down from my house, which is wonderful and horrible. And so I had to set those boundaries that I'm not real great at. But just companion homes can look so many different ways, right?
Yes.
There's no, we had one family who had a duplex, and there was an individual on, the provider lived on one side of the duplex, the individual lived on the other side of the duplex, and there was a door in the middle that opened up, right? We've got an individual who lives, the family lives upstairs, and the individual has his own apartment, like mother-in-law type unit downstairs, and he lives there. It really just depends on the individual and what works well for them.
So, sorry to interrupt, Darla, but so that scenario that you just described is exactly what my wife and I are interested in for our kids, where so initially we buy a duplex, and my wife and I live on one side and our kids live on the other side. And then as we age, a respite care provider or caregiver moves into the other side of the duplex and becomes the caregiver. So that scenario is acceptable.
My understanding, and Monica probably has more information on this than I do, is that it worked, but there had to be a door that opened between the 2 units that made the 2 units equal to 1. Is that right, Monica? Did I say that right?
In that regard, that's how it was. We also had a situation where we did have a duplex where an individual lived on one side, the family lived on the other side, but the companion home provider went and stayed with the person on the side to care for the individual. But in the event that, they could share, they could do things together, like having barbecues and having families over. But when that companion home provider wants to have their own free time, and that they have a respite care provider in there, that they could go to their own, basically their own home in that regard. It's working out the complexities. That's the one thing. And I would say it's kind of sometimes a frustrating thing, because people want to know really what are the exact parameters to this, when the whole idea or the concept is is what is it going to work for that individual? It's not brick and mortar. It's not a certain, it's not a certain nailed down. I mean, there are nailed down policies and procedures, but you can really flex it and make it what is person-centered for the person that you are looking at and wanting to support.
One thing that is interesting, and I think it's wrong, but is the individual who is who is the DDA client for a companion home has to live in the companion home's home, not the other way around, right? So, for example, where Jesse lives is a condo. He's getting old. It's a condo around the corner, and he's lives there. We bought that to be his forever home. My niece moved in as the person, and we had to rent it to her, and then he pays participation fees to her, but she is the tenant, even though it was already his home, right? So you have to kind of watch how you do those things with DDA. So if you bought a duplex, then you would just need to rent it to that companion home provider.
So Darla, what do you do about, so if you and your husband pass away, what happens to that property?
We're working on that, John. So I'm not there yet. I'll be completely transparent. This is my biggest nightmare. But what I understand to happen, because we have four living children and we have 3 properties. Bad math. And so what I think the plan is that we're going to create like a help family trust, and then the homes will go into the trust to be in perpetuity for my 2 sons who experience disabilities, so that they can live in them, right? Long term. And then after they pass, then the grandkids can sell the properties or whatever. That's the direction I think we're going. You know, I know that probably sounds unfair, but our other 2 children, my oldest son, I know you're not living with Rory, honey. Rory's going to live in a different house.
Not living in my condo.
No, he's not. Sorry. So
I'm still coming over to you.
but my oldest son and our daughter, who's in Chicago, they both make a really good wage and are very capable of caring for themselves. So while we will try to help take care of them in some way upon our passing, the majority of our focus is really to provide for my 2 sons who need additional services and who are not capable of providing that on their own. And that sounds terrible when I say it out loud, but anyway.
Well, of course, but so then the trust would continue the rental agreement with your niece / caregiver?
Yeah, the trust, my understanding, and again, Monica probably knows more about this than I do, but my understanding is that the trust would have a person who oversees it. And so that person would help fill in those roles, right?
It would be an executor, and it would be, it could be either a family or it could be somebody who's paid as a paid executor. The thing is that you don't want to have something in your son or daughter's name, because that would then, especially if they're receiving rent, it would put them over their resource limit. It doesn't mean that they can't have a house, they can, but if there's anything in the regards, like if you have somebody who moves in, then they have to pay rent, and then there's a lot of black and white issues that need to be really figured out and drawn out. And it doesn't mean that you can't put maybe some rent into a special needs trust. And again, we're getting to legalities that You know, I may play one on TV, but I certainly am not one in person. No, I don't know any, I mean, other than, same as Darla, you know, at that age that, you know, we've talked about, and I do have a special needs trust for Michael. But we do, I mean, my husband and I have collectively 5 kids. Michael has the most significant support needs, and how we're going to make sure that his needs are met, that a special needs trust is set up, that my daughter would be, which is his biological sister, would be the executor and is currently the standby guardian. So there are safeguards, and they are the what ifs. What if this? What if this? And those are some of the questions that you need to ask. And actually, those are some of the things that Darla and I are trying to navigate and help other families figure out what are the what ifs.
And the trust I was speaking of for the condo to go in, or the properties to go in, is a way to keep the properties out of, is it
Well, you know who's gonna move in.
escrow? Is that what it's called?
Out of probate.
Probate. It's a way to keep the properties out of probate,
Well, you know,
and to set up ahead of time what you want to happen with those properties in your will. That's very different than a special needs trust. My
Yep.
children do have a special needs trust too. Just a second, Jesse, let me
Men.
finish. My men have a special needs trust. The other thing is that so like we have the DD Endowment Trust through the Arc of Washington, right? For my men, sorry. And that's great. You cannot pay rent out of that DD Endowment Trust, but I could also open an ABLE account for them, and I could use money in the ABLE account to help pay for that. I think what my plan is to leave through the trust, leave it in a Health Family Trust to the grandkids for perpetuity for their uncles to live in, have the properties be paid down enough that the uncles could always set a rent amount that sorry, I'm getting family members. My grandkids could set the rent amount at a level that their uncles could afford, right? That's my kind of tentative plan that's not completely laid out right now.
You know, those are all the things that, you know, we as parents, is what keeps us up late at night, thinking of all the what ifs. And, you know, collective groups of us like this is what's going to help you get to the next point where, you know, what if this, what if that, because the alternative is just nothing that I could ever live with. And so I appreciate that you all are asking questions, that you're reaching out, and I hope you continue to do this, because this is, you know, even if we answer some of the what ifs today, it doesn't mean some of the what ifs haven't changed and won't change tomorrow. So it's just be open and talk with your family members who will be here. Like I talk with my daughter and son-in-law and my grandchildren about, you know, the needs of Uncle Michael. And so it's an open dialogue. And instead of just saying, this is what you're going to do, it's what is it going to look like? It just needs to happen.
And one thing too is that as we were having conversations around, excuse me, sustainability and how do we set this up for any of the residential options, right? Because supported living homes go out of business and adult family homes go out of business. And I mean, this sustainability issue is an issue regardless where your loved one is living. And one of the things that came up last week was that we've only been doing supported living in the community in any form for the last 40 years. We really are that first generations to come up against these problems. People with disabilities didn't used to live as long as they're living now. They didn't live into their senior years. And prior to that, we didn't have supported living in the community. So these things that we're tackling with today really are kind of some new issues. I kept thinking, why has nobody figured this out yet? It's like, oh, right? These are new things. My son's 34 years old, right? They had only been doing supported living for 6 years when he was born. So it's like, how do we think about these things and what does this look like, right? And so really, it's going to take all of us thinking together and trying to figure that out. I know somebody told me early on that you want to look 1 to 2 generations younger than the person with a disability, right? So my niece that's currently living with my son is in her early 20s, mid 20s, and my grandsons are younger than that, right? And so those are kind of those individuals that honestly, I'm kind of looking at them to kind of carry that torch when I'm no longer here. Let's hope that works.
And just to add on to what Darla was saying, interestingly, because there are a lot of people who have that are in supported living right now, that when supported living really came into place, there were people that were living in institutional settings and large group homes. Matter of fact, we had a large group home here in Clark County for a while that although it was a downsize from an RHC, it was still a large size group home that was more congregate care than it was individualized. But when people started leaving those types of situation, it was looking for openings. And so we have folks that may not have ever lived in Vancouver, that they ended up here because there was an opening. And so I know of, folks that parents that live in like Moses Lake, and their daughter lives in, in King County. And I know of other people that here, what's important is that you build community. I mean, the community is who's going to be there in the long run, because, not to throw DDA under the bus, it's where we are right now is how we need to collectively put a life together that's going to meet the needs. And it's not going to be with a case manager, because their role is to find housing, make sure that they have that's food, it's safety. And the hope would be that it would be inclusion and all those things, but it's what the family is going to be able to do. And looking, like Darla said, 2 generations back, how is that going to be sustained? Because it's going to be up to us to make sure that we have some sort of path that's in place that could be at least navigated by, like I said, and the conversations that we continue to have with our families that are going to be here when we're no longer here.
Are there any questions before we go to Valerie? We turn the recording off and go to Valerie?
Darcy, I have a comment.
Okay.
I love like the uncertainty and the flexibility of companion homes, because I think with a lot of other things, they're very rigid, and like everything is kind of an exception to the rule. And so like, are there any fears that like, do we need to protect companion homes from heading in that direction? How do we do that? Is my question.
So I think companion homes have already become more rigid than they were when we first started. And they've already started getting the I can't even talk, the system has started getting into them, right? And I think how we protect them is that as advocates, we just continue to have those conversations and push. There's that real fine line between making sure that the quality of care is there, and making sure security is there, and making sure the legal obligations is there without suffocating somebody with so many bureaucratic rules, right? And so how do we do all of those things? I know there for a couple of years, there was a lot of talk around, could we get supported living providers to run companion homes? Could we get a shared living model that's more like a companion home where maybe two people with a disability live together? I know, Jesse, can I share for a minute about you and Jackie? Anyway, they want to live together, but they're going to need help. They need somebody to live with them, right? And so how would that look, right? If we could have a companion home provider that could live with the two of them to support them. About you and Jackie wanting to live together. Is that okay?
Yeah, I want to be here. but
Okay, you can be here. So anyway, that would be really helpful to get your head down so people can see your face. This is Jesse, everybody. And anyway, so that
Just,
someone could be there to help with cooking and cleaning and shopping and bill paying and all of those
Mom,
things.
will you
right?
just share about it
I did that you and Jackie want to live together, right?
after Hannah moves out?
After Hannah moves out in the future, when you get married.
Mom, she's
What?
moving out next year.
Hannah's moving out next year. Yes. Okay, now let me finish. So,
Do you want me here?
no, I'm done. Thank you. So I think that we just need to continue to, central office really wants to address the lack of housing, right?
Whenever you.
And there's such a
share about
huge
me and
issue.
Jackie, I want to be here.
Okay, Jesse. And there's such a huge shortage in care providers, right? And so I think anything we can figure out is a good fit, is a good way to go. And honestly, companion homes for the most part are significantly cheaper than supported living. So it is a good deal for the state. Generally speaking, there's probably always outliers, but generally speaking, it's a good deal for the state, for the individuals that have this high level of acuity that really would not work in an adult family home. Sorry for all the interruptions. So Darcy, do you want to stop the recording? And
Yes, we will stop the recording and invite Valerie to